So it's now my role and pleasure again to make an introduction. And this time it is Chris Collins I am going to be introducing. Chris has agreed to moderate our first panel. And I have known Chris for many years, as many of you have. For those of you who don't know Chris, you can read more about him in his bio, which is linked. Chris joined SolarOne following an impressive career as a gay rights activist and lawyer. And in these past 10 years since I've known him, has led SolarOne to be one of New York City's most prominent environmental organizations and one that is a partner to workforce development organizations across our city in the green economy space. Chris has a unique vantage, and we're delighted that he's agreed to share his thoughts and to lead the discussion with our great panel ahead, whom he will introduce. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Lisbeth. I appreciate it. I'd like to welcome our panel today. First up is Greg Elcock, who is the Director of Energy Efficiency and Demand Management at Con Edison. Next, we have Ellie Kahn, who is the Senior Policy Advisor for the New York City Mayor's Office of Sustainability. And last, Daphany Rose Sanchez, who's the Executive Director of Kinetic Communities. Bios for all of the presenters can be found in the public folder. Before we get started, I'd just like to have a few words. And I come to this discussion with my own organizational bias. At SolarOne, we started out as an educational organization working with the Department of Education for the past 12 years on sustainability, with a particular focus on solar and energy. 3 of our signature education programs are the Solar Schools program for 100 plus schools getting solar on their buildings, our Career Clue program, which is our summer career mentoring program for 11th graders, and our solar, electrical, and soon to include construction career and technical education program for students who may not follow a college degree path. In 2012, SolarOne launched and developed a workforce training program that was focused on energy efficiency, green building operations and maintenance, green construction, plumbing, and electrical. And our programs serve people coming out of the justice system, former substance users, veterans, youth, et cetera. Last year, we trained about 340 people with about an 83%, about 283 people were placed in jobs and about a 78% retention rate 8 months later. So we're pretty pleased with the way that's going. And in 2015, SolarOne launched its Here Comes Solar program, a program that facilitates solar adoption in hard to serve markets by providing comprehensive technical assistance to building owners so they can identify and implement cost-effective solar projects. Our current programmatic focuses are multifamily and affordable housing, resilient solar, that's solar with battery backup, and community solar. That's a little bit about SolarOne, but when I look at the green economy, I look at 3 things. First, policy. Are there policies in place at the local level that encourage the growth of the green economy? There's no question that both the state and the city have put into place policies that encourage the growth of the green economy, and they have enacted mandates to require state and businesses within the state to hit certain carbon reduction goals in the near and long term. You'll hear from our panelists in a few minutes about those mandates and their impact on the job market. The second thing I look at is I follow the money. Is the government putting money into it? Is private money following suit? The state, as you heard from NYSERDA a few minutes ago, the state has committed billions of dollars through 2025 and beyond for clean energy initiatives that are being administered by NYSERDA. And of note, while there are budgetary considerations stemming from COVID, NYSERDA's funding falls outside of the normal legislative budgetary process because of the way it's funded. At the city level, the cuts will be deeper, but the green economy touches every aspect of this administration's priorities: affordable housing, job creation, poverty, and climate. And what about the private sector? Huge amounts of private capital are flowing into electric cars, solar, wind, batteries, and storage, to name a few. Our own solar development program at SolarOne has 600 buildings installed or in our pipeline, representing a $50 million in capital investment. So private money is definitely flowing in. And then the third thing to look at is what are the jobs and who has them? And how do we ensure access to them so the communities of color who've traditionally been left behind have access to them as well? Drilling down further, what's the plan for young adults and young adults of color who are entering a devastated economy with no prior work experience on their resumes, kids getting out of CTE schools? Green jobs encompasses a wide range of fields as well as jobs. And by fields, I mean things like energy, which includes solar, wind, and energy efficiency, resiliency like battery storage. It's expensive, but where solar was 10 years ago. The East Side Coastal Resiliency Project is slated to start later this year with a commitment that 30% of new hires will be from the local community. DEP's water infrastructure plan, food, transportation, and of course, parks and open space. So there's a host of different fields with a host of different jobs in them. So let's get started. I'd like to invite our guest speakers to raise their hands and indicate if they'd like to add something that another speaker says, but let's get started. So opening question for each panelist. How would you explain to someone outside the sector what your role in the green economy is? And Ellie, why don't we start with you?
Of course, and thanks, Chris, for the introduction and the wonderful keynote from Doreen Harris from NYSERDA. So many of the people on this call, if you're a workforce participant, workforce organization in the early part of this past decade, you may be a little bit burned by the idea of green jobs and this, there was a lot of investment in solar installation and things like that, and the jobs didn't materialize. I think we're in a very, very different position than we were in the early 2010s. There are very, very clear, strong policy drivers that are coming from both New York City and New York State, as Doreen Harris mentioned. So the New York City Mayor's Office of Sustainability, for a little context, is the agency that's responsible for helping the whole city become carbon neutral by 2050. We know this has to happen. We know that fossil fuels are on the way out, not only because this is happening in New York City, but it's happening globally. So towards carbon neutrality, we took a really big first step in 2019 with the passage of another set of laws similar to what happened at the state. Ours was called the Climate Mobilization Act, and it concerned New York City alone and sort of went above and beyond what the state is asking. New York City's buildings are actually its largest source of carbon emissions. And I think there was a question in the Q&A about sort of what's realistically going to happen in New York City versus elsewhere. And the answer is buildings. Those buildings aren't going anywhere. They have to be managed and serviced here. And so there's a real strong potential for buildings related jobs to be New York City specific. But getting back to sort of what the laws were, they basically said that buildings have to reduce their carbon in the next 10 years. There's a bunch of different kinds of ways that these laws will come into effect. Some of them are very clear in terms of the industries that are likely to grow. For example, one of the laws that passed in 2019 requires either green sort of vegetated roofs or solar on all new construction. So we know that means green roofing jobs. We know that means solar jobs. I think we estimated several thousand jobs in the next 10 years could come out of those laws. However, that one of the major laws that's going to generate, we estimate will generate 26,000 jobs or more in the next 10 years. Buildings can comply in any way they want. Basically, they have to meet a carbon budget, and they can do that by upgrading their HVAC systems. They can do that by switching from oil or gas to electricity. They can do that by installing solar on the roof. Since they have that flexibility, we don't know exactly what those private building owners are going to do. That's not in our control. But in general, we know that we're going to need tens and thousands more skilled construction workers and building management staff, people who design buildings, who have those green skills and really understand energy in a way that it's not industry standard right now.
Greg, do you want to respond next?
Yeah, sure, Chris. So let me start first with speaking broadly from the utility perspective, right? I think we see ourselves as continuing to be that conduit, that brings some of this new clean energy to the customer on the street, right? I see our role as more of a boots on the ground. So if those of us around long enough to remember manufactured gas, we use the pipes and wires then to bring you manufactured gas. That transitioned over to natural gas, electricity, and we will probably be around to bring that offshore wind, to power your cell phones, televisions, and all of your, all of the appliances of now and in the future. We also, involved in some aspects of storage. Electric vehicles, some of us may be familiar with New York State's recent order on storage. Utilities are involved there. And then primarily from where I sit as head of energy efficiency, really involved with the resource acquisition piece of the energy efficiency pie, right? That is bringing our energy efficiency programs and solutions to all of our customers in our territory.
Thanks, Greg. Daphne, how would you explain to someone outside of the sector what your role in the green economy is?
So my role is to ensure that every single climate action has a just transition lens. So I'm the executive director of Kinetic Communities. We are the first minority women benefit corporation in New York City doing energy equity work. I've been working in the intersection of housing and New Yorkers and energy efficiency for the past 12 years. And so when I explain to folks what am I doing and what's my work entail is working with utilities and governments, ensuring that climate plans are being inclusive, that they are being mindful, and that they're being centered around Black and Brown communities that have been in New York City way before the energy sector existed. And what does that look like? It looks like inclusive planning and inclusive engagement with nonprofits that have been providing social services and providing housing services to their constituents for decades, lifting them up, providing them with the proper resources so that they can also contribute to our climate action. And one of the things that we strongly advocate for in this kind of intersection of energy and housing is ensuring that any solution that is put forward related to housing, it is a solution that is supporting Black and Brown communities to start developing their intergenerational wealth that has been taken away from them in the past, and ensuring that the solutions, whether they're solar, energy efficiency, air source heat pumps, and renewable technologies, that it is centered on ownership and it is centered on supporting and uplifting those communities.
And as an entrepreneur and creator of a minority women business enterprise in the green economy, what's your vantage point on what it means to build an inclusive workforce? What are the challenges and opportunities, and what's the role of public and affordable housing in the green economy?
Yeah, I would say as an MWBE, first of all, the work of green economy I always like to address is just general construction. The methodologies and the marketing is just very shiny so that folks don't realize kind of the construction aspect of it. So one of the things as an MWBE that we do is really encourage MWBEs and encourage the utilities and government to invest in translation and not yes, literal translation from English to Spanish, but also translation of technical to plain English so that MWBEs can participate in these programs that are often designed for manufacturers and for large construction firms that are outside of the neighborhoods and the communities that need the work. As a small business, as a woman of color in this space, representation is so important. We see time and time again, frontline communities are affected by disinvestment in affordable housing. They're affected by climate change and Hurricane Sandy, and they're not actively there when the solutions are being designed. And so our role is to kind of put up that red flag and say, like, here are folks that have been here way before I was born, advocating for these communities and making sure that they are at that table that they've designed. And so it is very important to me as an MWBE to ensure that that representation is there with programs. In the aspect of affordable housing, because again of this disinvestment in Black and Brown communities, our role is ensuring that any energy efficiency projects or renewable projects that are happening in low-income communities and communities of color are packaged in a way that does not hurt those communities. And what does that mean? Is that we want to ensure that if we're incorporating a solution for solar, if we're incorporating a solution to do installations or put in a new boiler or put in new windows, that it's done with local contractors. It's either the super is properly trained so that they can do it themselves. A local contractor has access to rebates and grants so that there's that kind of cushion of funding to support that learning curve, and to ensure that whatever financing or loans that a homeowner or a building needs is a loan that is supportive of their financial situation and it's not predatory, which forces them to accelerate a foreclosure on their home. And so it's very important when we're looking at affordable housing to be mindful of the intersections of financing, to be mindful of the historical disinvestment in those communities and not accelerate something that will trigger gentrification.
Excellent. Greg, from an energy efficiency point of view, those jobs have been heralded as the low-hanging fruit of the growing green economy jobs. As director of the energy efficiency programs at Con Ed, you have a unique vantage point into that. What's at stake in building inclusivity in the workforce? What are the challenges, opportunities, and how is that part or not part of your mandate at Con Ed?
Yeah. Okay, Chris. So maybe a little bit of perspective, and then we dive into the question a little bit. So here at Con Ed, more than half of our workforce is currently made up of minorities, and 20% are women at the moment. So I want to be clear up front that we see our mission as diversity and inclusion, right? An inclusive culture, as I see it, values everyone as an important member of the working team, right? A feeling you have when those around you recognize your importance and want your contributions. We strive for our diversity numbers to be strong. Equally, we need every woman and man at Con Ed to feel respected, included, and safe to speak up. We need their new ideas and different points of view. Diversity and inclusion is how we get there. And making that a reality is part of my everyday job, from hiring decisions, to the way I manage on a day-to-day basis. With respect to being part of our mandate, and this is focusing now narrowly in on energy efficiency goals in particular. Our primary metrics are associated with resource acquisition, which is really, the reductions of electric and gas usage on our customer premises. If we look at the growth of energy efficiency achievement over the last 3 years or so, I think it has shown that when incentivized appropriately, utility is able to meet and in some cases achieve above required goals, right? So maybe viewing it through that lens, maybe there are creative ways to work with the current primary agencies with responsibility for workforce development on training and other elements needed for the green jobs of today and those that will happen in the future.
Ellie, back to you. With One NYC's continued focus on growth and sustainability and resiliency, and the Mayor's Office of Sustainability's role in that and supporting that vision, can you share any facts and figures on green economy jobs in New York City, and where are those jobs growing?
Absolutely. So it's really difficult to put a number on that because defining what a green job is a challenge, and it sort of depends who you ask. My personal opinion is that there are jobs that fit in very neatly into sort of the green jobs category. You have a solar installer, or you're doing insulation. That's very clearly a sustainability, a green initiative. but there can be green jobs in virtually every sector. We actually need that to be the case if we are going to reach our goals. And at some point, those green jobs will just be jobs. As Daphne was saying, a lot of these green jobs that we're talking about are just construction. We needed that policy lever to kind of push construction to become greener, to push more construction jobs that are specifically focused on energy and greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So we have some estimates in terms of specific policies that have come out and what we anticipate the number of jobs will come out of that. I think I mentioned over 26,000 jobs came from one piece of legislation that passed in 2019. And that's only in the 2020 to 2030 period. Those are going to continue onwards because the laws continue to get more and more stringent as you approach 2050 and our carbon neutrality goal. That paired with some of the state's initiatives, I think there's a really big push. They're investing very heavily in, workforce in the private sector. The city's investing very heavily within its own portfolio of buildings and properties. And those are going to drive really good union jobs that, provide stability and benefits for a large number of people, especially paired with some of the city's initiatives. I think Deputy Mayor Thompson is going to speak soon about some local hire initiatives that his team is working on, but also our MWBE goals and requirements for contracts mean that more MWBEs are going to be participating. I highlight MWBEs because sort of trying to figure out where to plug in a workforce space. Generally what I've heard from, experienced people in the workforce development field is that you have to follow the employers and see what they want to go. By investing in and fostering minority and women-owned businesses, you're inherently building more wealth in communities of color. You're building more job opportunities to people who otherwise may not have had access to those pipelines. And so there's sort of many different prongs and many different ways to assess it. I would argue that most jobs can be green jobs, and I hope by 2050, literally every job in New York City is considered a green job.
I'd like to chime in here if that's okay, Chris.
Sure.
I mean, it's so critical what Ellie says, and this is kind of the pain point, is the work that we're already doing. The work of energy efficiency is construction, right? What is an air source heat pump? It's plumbing work. What is solar? It's electrical work. What is, passive house? It's insulation. So it's general constructions, your GCs, your contractors that have been out there, and there are hundreds of approved MWBEs working in this sector, right? But because we don't associate the work of like, oh, you're a plumber, so you can do solar thermal. Oh, you're a plumber, so you can do HVAC. That kind of interrelationship in the conversation needs to change. And then another thing that I think is so critical is I just shared on one of the Q&As is one of the things that we always recommend is Rosa Gonzalez spectrum of community engagement when programs are being designed, when folks are thinking about how do you do solar, how do you do energy efficiency. Thinking about at what point you're engaging the community can also foster a positive relationship with workforce and with the success of a project, and making sure that you're just not ignoring the community and coming in and saying, we're going to put solar, this is great, and being more inclusive and saying like, what are the existing issues that you have? You might say, well, we have an HVAC contractor who's struggling because of COVID and he hasn't gotten any jobs. And we could say, okay, this is a great opportunity for you to, we'll help you get approved by the state so that you can get the rebates or the grants directly, and they can start doing building installation and be an approved energy contractor. So just really making those connections and making it transparency and like pulling off the glam, that's what's going to make us move forward and hit these goals and hit them in a way that's just for Black and Brown communities and low-income folks in the built environment and in like other sectors of efficiency and energy.
Well, I want to go to a little Q&A for a few minutes, but before I do, I just want to get your impressions about what are the kinds of things that each of you is doing, or the kinds of things that you see that will benefit youth, young adults coming into the job market. Where do you see their role, and where do they fit in? I'll give that to anyone who wants to answer that.
Well, maybe I'll take a stab, Chris. We have, generally supported multiple efforts, right? From, I guess, part of this panel, Green City Force, from the get-go. Many of our contractors and subcontractors that have, on their own youth employment programs. We recently did something with one of our major partners, which involved bringing in a cadre of young persons, training them up for the very specific jobs that subcontractor would have required. We supported that. We had a nice little graduation ceremony, and most of those young persons are now employed, right? And that is just one quick example, I think, of the very specific kinds of things we're doing.
Great. Ellie, how about you?
Sure. I mean, I think I'd probably kick that question back to young people, because they're the ones who are sounding the alarm about the climate emergency. They're the ones who are sort of banging on the windows and doors saying, this matters, this is important, and this is existential for us. Not only in terms of our jobs and our quality of life, but just, being able to survive on this planet in the long term. So to a certain degree, I'd say foster that spirit, foster that activism, and they'll find the ways to integrate sustainability into any kind of job that they're doing. I have a lot of faith in them. They've shown, the young people right now have very much shown how dedicated they are and how creative they are to solve the climate crisis. Right. And I don't know, I would love to foster that so that we have this more racially just and socially and economically equitable New York City as part of our transition away from fossil fuels.
Daphne?
Yeah, I would also I'm not too worried. And I think one of the things that's beautiful about them is their level of entrepreneurship, is their level of creativity to addressing the inefficiencies in our world. The current way that we are getting towards climate action is not good enough, right? We need more access, we need more opportunities. And if we continue asking folks to just you have to go to school, you have to get an entry-level job, and then you can do something, that system no longer works. And so seeing the next generation coming up with their own creative ideas and really giving them that platform and saying, you know what, we've tried this route, it doesn't work. How can we support you? How can we give you the tools, the resources, the training to make sure that you can succeed with this climate action idea that you have? And really, again, being mindful of the community, because they are part of that community, and supporting them to build that wealth that was taken away from them before they were even born.
Okay, let's take a couple of questions from the audience. One from Connie Mendez at Henry Street Settlement asks, how can I engage more employers in the green economy? Do we have any thoughts on that?
So I'll let you talk about the internship program, but one of the things that I always recommend we have an energy equity fellowship program for high school students and college students. And one of the things we always strongly recommend and we'll share with them is, here are the resources of the existing establishment, who are the utilities that work in the energy space, who are the agencies that fund energy efficiency and housing. And I'll tell them to look at their listservs, to look at their approved contractor list, and to look at their news announcements for individuals that have just been awarded a multi-million-dollar contract for solar or X, Y, and Z. Unfortunately, the state of New York, as an authority, they do not have to comply with MWBE regulations, so they can just have one organization do work. But I still strongly encourage you to reach out to them and be very vocal about, hey, I see, congratulations, you're going to do this 6 megawatt of solar. We would love to have some of our students at least have either a chance to speak with you, have a chance to learn about it, and even the opportunity to intern or be hired for this project.
Great.
If I can add on that, so the city does have an MWB requirement, so city projects have to have MWBs. The other thing is NYSERDA has really wonderful workforce grants. So if you approach a company and say, hey, I have free money for you to hire an intern, just tell me what they need to know. Tell me what kind of skills you're looking for and what kind of candidate you're looking for. So I would plug, let's use as much of that in New York City as possible. State funds, so let's bring it back down here. But yeah, and so for example, we've done that with an internship program that the Mayor's Office of Sustainability partnered with CUNY on, and that's for STEM college students. And basically, the Mayor's Office of Sustainability is working with a lot of sort of architecture and engineering firms and consultancies that specifically deal in energy with our sort of day-to-day work. And we realized that a lot of them were recruiting from out of city elite universities and not necessarily the local talent that we have here that's a bit more diverse as well. And so basically just talking to those employers, finding out what kind of skills they wanted to have in a candidate, connecting them to those internship funds so that they can reduce the financial burden and the potential risk of bringing on an intern. And then you create this sort of pipeline of students who are predominantly people of color, very high proportions of immigrants and first generation, primarily lower income than many of the other colleges that people had been recruiting from. And that at least gets people in the door and sort of creates new relationships that will last into the future.
That's great. Greg, I have a little different take on that. What are the supply chain opportunities to support that kind of effort?
Yeah, sure. Well, very specifically, we have a supply diversity group here at Con Ed that, and if you can't measure it, you can't know what is happening, right? So they have very specific metrics for engagement around WEs, subcontractors, and the whole spectrum. And that I think is an interesting way to begin to get involved directly in some of these green jobs and green economy initiatives, at least specifically with our company. What I just wanted to go back to the question before. What I like to say is that I start with me. What I mean by that is happy to go out, talk to students, talk to high schools, talk to these organizations, and as well as via our strategic partnerships group. We also have been, supporting a number of these green initiatives, and we have skewed specifically towards green economy and the green initiative opportunities. So, just putting that out.
That's so very, very important. We do that a lot with Con Ed and other companies around the city who come in and help to mentor a lot of the students in high school and CTE program. It's a great thing to open up people's eyes to think about what they can do. I guess one other one is another question's come in, and then I'm mindful that we have to start to wrap up here. How has COVID affected the enforcement of local law mandates that you referred to, Ellie?
So we're in the middle of a crisis right now, but it's a nested crisis. It's a crisis within a crisis, which is that larger climate crisis. We can't lose sight, and so we are absolutely moving forward with Local Law 97, which is the one I believe that you are referring to, the law, and we can't lose sight of that.
Yep, and we can't lose sight of the fact that the work we're talking about is critically important because it affects not just job creation, but also its livelihood. It results in more food security, more rent security, all sorts of stuff that ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what this is really kind of all about. Let's do a quick lightning round because I know we're running out of time. We only have a couple of minutes left. For each of you, what's the one thing that everyone joining this event that they can do this week to tilt the future towards social and economic inclusion for young adults in the green economy?
I would just, in a lightning round, I would say, keep and stay informed about what's happening. There's too many times, I've had conversations with multiple organizations and, the opportunity has passed. We have not looked at what's happening with state policy. And some of the easiest ways to inform yourself is to keep abreast of what is happening.
Ellie?
I'd absolutely agree with Greg on that one. There's some good resources out there. Some in sort of jargon, some in more plain language. I'll drop the names of a couple, but there's plenty more besides the ones that are coming to mind right now. There's Urban Green Council, and they have a lot of information about laws that are coming up, different drivers of industry and workforce. And then there's Building Energy Exchange, which has a lot of resources on its website and is a good place to learn more about what's going on in this field. Staying informed is essential. I think in terms of what you can do this week, we have the Mayor's Office of Sustainability has a handy set of actions that you can choose from for Climate Week. If you follow them on any sort of social media platform, it's at GREENYC, so GreenYC with one N. And there's a suite of options that you can choose that specifically focus on climate justice.
Great. Daphne?
I would just say kind of a two-prong approach. One on like the larger scheme is just investment in youth so that they can have that opportunity and then access. A lot of times the energy sector is like, you should come to us and ask us, but feel comfortable in telling us we need to go to you and we need to spend time in your classrooms or spending time in the evenings and in weekends in whatever language that you need it, because the reality is that climate change affects everyone, and it further affects frontline communities and BIPOC communities at a much graver, it has a much graver effect. And we want to make sure that whatever action we're doing moving forward is an action that can start providing restorative justice. And then for the week, I have a shameless plug. I will be celebrating Black, Indigenous people of color on October 7th. And so you're all welcome to join us here exclusively from folks that are in the front lines doing energy efficiency work. And like, what does it mean as a BIPOC community to drive climate action? So I encourage you all to come and join us.
Yeah, that's
I'd like to make one last plug.
Okay.
You have one more week to fill out the census. So that's one major thing that you can do. It helps climate, it helps everything. So fill out your census, encourage other people to do so as well.
And vote.
And please vote.
And please vote.
And I'd just like to say, one of the things that I think we can all do, and everybody on this call can do, is just start to follow the money, see where the money is being invested, see where this sector is going to grow so quickly during this recovery period. NYSERDA, as I said, has billions of dollars that they're required to file chapter verse of how they want to spend that money with the Public Service Commission. They're all public documents. It's a great roadmap to look at where they're going, what they're going to be funding, the kinds of things they're going to be funding. I'm sure the city has similar things, and it's real important to sort of look at private industry and see what they're funding. And that's a great roadmap for where we can see these jobs and fields starting to grow and emerge. With that, I do want to thank all of our panelists, as well as the folks at Jobs First for inviting us here today. I hope it was an informative and educated discussion. And I'm sure that if there are additional questions, we'll try and get answers back after the presentation.